Well, this is it. The season is officially upon us. We're having our first 65 and 70 degree days here in Maryland, and it's shown in the past week and a half. Our foot traffic has increased significantly. So in today's video, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I do to get my shop prepped for the springtime. These are not things that I wait to do until we're in the peak of our season. For us, that's looking at April, May, June. That's when we're running white hot and time is of the essence. I try my best to set myself up so that I have as few repeating tasks as possible during that time of year where we just have people coming in constantly and we have to be focusing on turning around work orders and making sure that there's enough stock on our floor for sale. One of those big things that I do is I do my best to arm myself to the teeth with all of the basic essentials. So nobody has a crystal ball and can accurately predict every little thing that they're gonna need, but there are some obvious staples such as tires, tubes, brake pads, cables, housing, things of that nature. Things that I don't want to be focusing time and effort on reordering and checking stock levels during our busiest time of year. I like to put myself in a position where I will confidently have enough of these basics, at least into late summer. And so I will really front load my orders. Typically January, February timeline is when I will do a little bit of a deep dive and see what's all the product that we used last year and use that as an estimate for what we should be stocked with going into the spring and especially into the summer. Now, I will offer the caveat that there is the obvious issue of space. We don't overstock ourselves so heavily that we're tripping over things. And this primarily comes down to bikes and larger items such as tires. I will not get a war chest of 1,000 sets of tires, but rather I'll just look at what I need to at least get me through Independence Day, which is the white hot portion of our season. And this brings me into something that I've discussed before, and I may sound like a broken record getting into this, but on the concept of inventory, another reason I would really vouch for the used bike model is there is something that I've noticed is a keen advantage when it comes to ordering in inventory, and especially lack of having to forecast. I've noticed as a big disadvantage to the traditional system of point and click ordering, especially in recent years, it really surprises me the lack of inventory that you tend to see. We are actually a non-stocking dealer for one of the big brands. And so I do get to take a peek under the hood and see what's available. Our bread and butter is obviously used bikes, but if somebody has interest in getting a new bike, but getting our generous warranty, they have the option to do so. They just won't be able to test ride that bike in our store beforehand. So this is really for the customers that are already familiar with what they want. But just in having exposure to that side of things where I can see what is available and in stock, the premise seems to be with new bike companies that you should have a crystal ball and you should order almost everything that you're going to have as far as bike sales for the foreseeable year ahead of time, because if you don't, they're going to be out of stock on those items and you're going to be out of luck. To me, this sounds like a difficult and unnecessary hurdle. Just this week, I picked up 20 some odd bikes for inventory. We're not quite in the part of the season where things are running white hot yet, but I am able to basically keep my finger on the pulse and order bikes, AKA source them via local secondhand marketplace, kind of as I go. So I'm not really in this position where I'm trying to see what bikes am I going to be selling 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 12 months from now. But rather, with the used bike model, I'm able to take a look on my floor on a weekly or monthly basis. And if I'm short on, say, mountain bikes, I can go out and pick up more mountain bikes. This puts me much more in tune and gets my finger on the pulse on exactly what the store needs in the moment. And it's also a really cash flow friendly way to run my business. I don't have to front tens of thousands of dollars into inventory early in the year during a time when I don't have a strong income coming in, only to find that 10 or 20% of that inventory I miss the mark on and I'm stuck with going into November and December. and then I ultimately have to discount before it becomes devalued going into the next year. Instead, with used bikes, I can keep the cycle going, and as soon as I'm getting low in something, I can effectively remediate that problem on the fly. And so I've been thinking about that these past few weeks as I've armed myself for the season. Obviously, I am stocking myself up and giving myself a bit of a backlog. I like to keep roughly 50 bikes on my floor with an even split between hybrids, mountain bikes, and road bikes. But then in the back room and on off-site storage, I will keep repeats of probably an additional 30 or 40 bikes just to get me through the meat of the season. There's always that give and take of bikes being sold, bikes being traded in. But during those white hot months of April, May, June, I might be so focused on the service department that I don't necessarily have time to be taking in this trade-in I got last week, tuning it up and getting it ready for the floor. Rather, I like to have 20 or 30 bikes on the back burner ready to go that I can just swoop in and it can replace an empty spot on the floor in the moment. Over the past seasons, I've learned where that magic spot is, and I like to start the season with between 80 and 100 bikes. This usually will have things getting thinned out somewhere around early to mid-June. And then on top of that, after Independence Day, our service department dials back a little bit to where I can squeeze in more time to get trade-ins floor ready. By the way, just a really quick note, if you're interested in drilling down further and figuring out how to either start or optimize your current bike business, we do have a tremendous amount of value behind our memberships. We're really proud of what we've packed in to something that we can essentially make available at a really accessible price point. It's essentially all of my hard-earned lessons over these past 10 years in business. You can check out the links below. With this, we get a good turnover. We'll move 150 bikes during season, and then an additional 50 to 75 during the off season. But that off season time, I'm way less concerned about optimizing because, as many bike shop owners know, during the winter, you have ample time to take on any projects that you need. But I just bring this up as yet another argument for the used bike model, not necessarily to say that you should replace your model entirely, but if you find that inventory issues and always having the right stock on your floor is a stressor for you, especially during peak time, you may be able to mitigate that in a low-cost manner just by getting yourself 20 or 30 used bikes on the back burner. And then you can use those as filler for the parts of your inventory that run dry during times of the year where foot traffic is high and you really do need to have something on the floor. So I know we've talked a lot about inventory and getting yourself prepped for the peak season, but I do want to mention the other big thing that I do to get myself prepared is really just making sure that my shop is clean and professional looking. This is something that I stay on top of on an ongoing basis, and you'll see me doing a full sweep and vacuum through at least once a week. But I bring it up as a note because it does surprise me the number of shops that you walk into, and it's not necessarily the most cleanly and organized space you've ever seen. And I do get it. It's a bike shop and there's a lot of dirty bikes coming in and out and a lot of fast action. But in my viewpoint in retail, you do want to have a focused effort on maintaining a clean and professional experience for your customers. So it's really not a bad idea to deploy some spring cleaning. Obviously, you'd be doing this more so in the winter in preparation for the spring, but really do your best to maintain a clean presence. This is kind of a mindless thing that you can do that doesn't take a super large part of your day. Sometimes just getting into the shop 20 minutes early or staying 15 or 20 minutes after to do a quick sweep really makes a big difference in your shop presence, especially if you're somebody who tends to let these things go over time. In peak season, a week straight of not sweeping or vacuuming carpeted surfaces can make your shop look more like a garage than a professional retail environment. So if you're looking at the two biggest things that I think of going into peak season, it's prepping myself as best as possible with inventory so I can spend less time worrying about that in the heat of the moment, and also making sure that my shop looks spick and span and as professional as possible. Let me know in the comments what you do to prep for the season, especially if you're in a similar region to the country as I am. I know that you're in that spot right now where you're in prep mode and you're getting ready to go.